If this is a joke, it really should have come with a punchline. The receptionist blinked, holding the beige manila envelope between two manicured fingers as if it might stain her blazer. Her voice dripped with the kind of polite disdain reserved for food service complaints and men in overalls who smelled like bleach. Lincoln Morrow didn't flinch. He stood still, broad-shouldered, but slouched one hand gripping the mop handle, the other nervously brushing the stubble on his jaw. His janitor's uniform was freshly laundered, though the color had long faded into a muted blue-gray. The name stitched over his chest, L. Morrow barely caught the fluorescent light from the marble-tiled lobby. "I was told this is where I submit it," he said quietly. "Executive floor." "That's correct," the receptionist replied, tapping her acrylic nails against the envelope. "It's just unusual." Her eyes flicked from the folder to the man before her. "Janitors don't usually apply for jobs up here." "I'm not usually one to ask," Lincoln said, then offered a small, tired smile. "But here we are." For a moment, the silence between them held not tense, but brittle. Then the receptionist sighed, placed the envelope on a sleek silver tray beside the espresso machine, and turned back to her computer. Lincoln didn't expect a thank you. He'd learned long ago that hope was heavier than any mop bucket. As he turned, the elevator behind him dinged. The mirrored doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the executive suite of Ventrix Capitol Floor 32, a world above his own. And inside that world, Evelyn Rhodes was holding court. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and money. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Chicago skyline like a painting, sharp lines endless ambition. Evelyn sat at the head of a long conference table, chin tilted, a glass of cucumber water untouched before her. She was striking in that dangerous way, not beautiful like in magazines, but elegant, like a knife unsheathed. Black heels, tailored navy dress, no jewelry but the watch that ticked louder in silence. A junior assistant placed the manila envelope on the table. "What's this?" she asked without looking. "New applicant," the assistant said, "for the executive assistant role." Evelyn opened the envelope, then paused. One page, Times New Roman, left justified, no bullet points. Lincoln Morrow, she read aloud, and half the room turned. Currently, janitorial staff, former maintenance supervisor, volunteer, Little League coach. Someone chuckled. Evelyn didn't. She flipped the page expecting a reference letter. There was one. From a local pastor. The signature was smudged. "Does he know this is for my assistant?" "Evelyn," asked her voice, smooth as glass over ice. The room laughed polite. Corporate laughter. Not too loud. Always aligned. Evelyn set the resume down and leaned back in her chair. "The city has lost its sense of irony," she muttered. Meanwhile, Lincoln was pushing his mop down the west corridor, humming quietly to himself. He wasn't a graceful man. Each step had weight. But his eyes were sharp, scanning every spill, every scuff, every forgotten half-crushed coffee cup. He moved like someone who cleaned not just for pay, but for peace. People passed him without nodding. Some walked around him like he was a caution sign. He was used to that. But that day, the silence was different. It carried a current whispers echoing from behind glass partitions, laughter behind hands, glances that lingered just a second too long. By the time he reached the break room, the whisper had a name. "Did you hear a young associate whispered over a sandwich?" The janitor applied to be Evelyn Rhodes's assistant. "No way. I saw the resume. Times New Roman man. Poor guy's gonna get roasted." Lincoln stood by the coffee machine, pretending not to hear, waiting for the water to boil. He stirred in a sugar packet just to keep his hands from shaking. He took a sip, burned his tongue, and quietly poured the rest down the drain. Back in the boardroom, Evelyn rotated the resume with a fingertip. Her eyes narrowed. Something about it bothered her, not the audacity but the tone. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't arrogant either, just clear. "I am a widowed father of one. I work nights so I can take my daughter to speech therapy during the day. I believe that the job of an assistant is not to manage tasks but to notice the moments no one else is watching. She read that line again. It wasn't well written, but it was well lived. Rhodes, Wyatt Granger. The COO leaned in. You can't be seriously considering this. Evelyn didn't answer. She was staring at the last sentence on the page. I don't have a degree, but I'm very good at noticing things that are broken even when no one says they are. Something in her jaw tightened. Wyatt scoffed. What is this, a PR stunt? A pet project? You really want to be the CEO who hired the janitor as her assistant? Evelyn stood. Her chair didn't creak. It never dared. I want someone I can trust, she said, not someone who wants my job. Then she picked up the envelope and walked toward the elevator. Down in the lobby, Lincoln was wiping fingerprints off the glass doors when the chime sounded again. The doors opened. Evelyn Rhodes stepped out, envelope in hand, heels clicking like a metronome against the marble. Mr. Morrow, she said, crisp as winter air. Lincoln straightened. Ma'am, you brought your daughter to the Christmas party last year, didn't you? Her voice was neutral. Yes, he said. She likes the lights. You cleaned up spilled eggnog in under 30 seconds. No one asked you to. Someone could have slipped. Evelyn looked at him for a long assessing moment. Not up, not down, just at. I don't make decisions based on pity, she said. I'm not asking for it. She extended the envelope toward him. 1 week trial. Starting tomorrow. You mess up, you're out. No hand-holding, no special treatment. Lincoln looked at the envelope, then at her. I'll be early. Evelyn turned already halfway back to the elevator. Most people are, she said, without looking back, and, as the doors closed, Lincoln looked down at the envelope in his hand. It wasn't heavy, but for the first time in years it felt like the weight of possibility. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and for the first time in his life, Lincoln Morrow stepped onto the 32nd floor not with a mop but with a clipboard and a second-hand tie that still smelled faintly like lavender soap. It was 7:42 a.m., early, but not early enough. Nora, he whispered, adjusting the tiny backpack over his shoulder. You remember what we talked about, right? Quiet feet. Stay close. No spinning. The 6-year-old beside him didn't answer. She just looked up with wide, curious eyes, blinked once, and nodded. Then she reached down, slipped off the too tight sneakers she'd refused to wear for more than 15 minutes, and stood barefoot on the cold, polished floor. Nora Lincoln sighed, crouching beside her. We talked about the shoes. She held up her hands, fingers dancing in the soft, silent language they'd both worked so hard to learn. They hurt. The noise is too loud when I wear them. He nodded. Okay, just stay on the rug, yeah. The elevator closed behind them. Lincoln straightened his tie in the reflective glass. It was crooked. It didn't matter. What mattered was not messing up. What mattered was keeping the job. 32 floors away, Evelyn Rhodes walked into her office like she owned not just the room, but the skyline it looked out on. She wore black ink. Today sleek architectural as if her outfit was a warning. Wyatt Granger was already waiting. I heard the janitor showed up, he said, not looking up from his tablet. Evelyn poured herself a cup of coffee. He's not a janitor today. Wyatt scoffed. You know what people are saying. I don't make decisions based on what people say. That's your job. He set the tablet down. You're staking your reputation on a guy who doesn't know what a VPN is. Evelyn sipped her coffee. And you're staking yours on interns who plagiarize press releases. The silence hung like a loaded question. Then the door opened, and Lincoln Morrow stepped in carefully, politely, holding a leather notepad that had seen better decades. Behind him, Nora clutched the sleeve of his coat, peeking out like a shadow with a heartbeat. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the girl, then down. Bare feet. She blinked once, said nothing. Good morning, ma'am, Lincoln said. Voice calm but tight. I wasn't able to get childcare today. I didn't want to reschedule the trial day. I didn't ask for an explanation, Evelyn said. Lincoln's spine straightened. Yes, ma'am. Wyatt stood looking Nora over like she was a fire hazard. This floor isn't exactly a daycare, he muttered. Evelyn turned sharply. "She's not staying. Are you?" Nora didn't flinch. She simply walked forward slowly and placed a small plastic figurine on Evelyn's desk. A tiny elephant. Blue. Missing an ear. Evelyn stared at it. Nora made a sign with her fingers. Lincoln translated quietly. "She says it's for courage. Because you're brave to hire her dad." Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came out. Wyatt snorted. "She talks through him now. What is this, a circus audition?" Lincoln didn't look at him. He only knelt beside Nora and whispered, "Go sit on the bench outside, okay? No wandering. 2 feet on the cushion, promise?" Nora nodded. Slid away silently, her bare feet padding across the floor like a prayer no one heard. Evelyn watched her go, then turned back to Lincoln. "Don't be late for the 900 meeting. You'll take notes, transcribe, and follow up with action items by noon. If anything confuses you, ask Rachel, not me." "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, and if your daughter's on this floor again without an escort, the trial ends immediately. I understand." But what Evelyn didn't see, couldn't have seen, was the moment Nora paused just outside the glass wall of the office, turned back, and raised her hand. One simple ASL sign. "I'm okay." And then she was gone. The day unfolded in pieces. Lincoln fumbled with the office copier like it was a bomb he didn't want to detonate. He misspelled confidential in the subject line of an internal email. He knocked over a glass paperweight shaped like a globe and caught it with a reflex honed from catching falling mops. But he was kind. To the security guard no one greeted. To the temp in accounting who cried in the break room. To the intern who dropped her entire salad on the floor and froze in embarrassment. He bent down beside her, handed her a napkin, and said, "Happens to the best of us. Trust me." I once mopped up 4 gallons of pickle brine in front of the mayor. By noon, he had everyone's names memorized. By 2 p.m., he'd reorganized Evelyn's supply cabinet alphabetically and by expiration date. By 3, he was exhausted. He found Nora curled up on the bench near the window, sketching on a legal pad with a half-broken pencil. The pad was filled with boxes and lines. Doodles, pathways, labels. He blinked. "Is this?" "The floor plan?" Nora nodded. "And this part?" "The question marks. The place where phones don't work." Lincoln frowned. "You noticed that?" She shrugged. Just then, Evelyn's door opened. She looked down at the sketch in Nora's lap. Then up, then down again. No comment, just one nod. That night, as Lincoln packed up the last of the documents and wiped his hands on a handkerchief that once belonged to his late wife, Evelyn passed by on her way out. She didn't stop walking, but she said without turning, "She's quiet, but she's watching everything." Lincoln nodded. "She's always been that way. She reminds me of a cat I had once. Wouldn't wear a collar, didn't like noise, but knew where every spider in the house was." He chuckled softly. "That sounds like Nora. She's strange. She's brilliant." Evelyn paused. "You really think you belong here?" she asked. Lincoln met her gaze. "No, but I belong wherever she needs me to be." A long silence. Then Evelyn turned. "Don't be late tomorrow." And with that, she disappeared down the hall, heels clicking like punctuation marks in a story not yet written. Lincoln looked down at Nora, who had now fallen asleep under his desk, curled around her sketch pad like a treasure. He picked up one tiny shoe she'd left on the floor and whispered, "You're gonna change everything, aren't you? Where's the send button?" Lincoln squinted at the screen like it was written in a dead language. "It's literally right there," mumbled Rachel, the executive assistant at the next desk, without even looking up from her own monitor. She stabbed a manicured finger toward the blinking blue square. Lincoln clicked it. Nothing happened. A second passed. Then the screen froze. The entire system locked up like a nervous freshman on prom night. "Great," Rachel muttered. "You crashed Outlook. Again." Lincoln laughed nervously. "I guess the computer sensed I wasn't corporate material." Rachel glanced at him, and for the first time all morning, her voice softened. "Look, you seem nice, but this place eats nice guys alive." It was only 10 to 23 a.m., and Lincoln was already behind. He'd spilled coffee on his shirt during the 800 strategy briefing. He forgot to mute himself during the 9:15 Zoom call and accidentally hummed "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" under his breath while filing shared documents. He couldn't figure out how to open the scanner tray and nearly broke it trying. But at 10:45, when Evelyn's 20-year senior consultant slammed his laptop shut and stormed out after being let go, Lincoln was the only one who stood up. He didn't say much. He just handed the man a glass of water and walked with him to the elevator, resting a firm hand on his shoulder. You mattered here, even if they didn't say it out loud. The elevator doors closed. Lincoln turned, and everyone was watching him. Nora, meanwhile, had made her own kind of mess. Somewhere between the corner conference room and the west window hallway, she had found a box of crayons and several abandoned blueprints no one had cared about in weeks. She sat cross-legged, barefoot, and completely silent, like a child monk scribbling layer upon layer of color and code. She wasn't drawing ponies or rainbows. She was drawing pathways, flowcharts, circuit logic, labeling things like data choke here and user grid lost. One of the senior engineers happened to pass by. He slowed, then stopped. "Who taught her to read network architecture?" he whispered. Rachel replied without looking up. "She's 6. She can't read." The engineer blinked. "Well, she just flagged a data loop we've been trying to isolate for 2 weeks." By noon, the office atmosphere had shifted. Rachel started saying please. The grumpy IT guy brought Lincoln a donut. Even Evelyn, normally a fortress of iron logic and zero facial expressions, paused as she passed Lincoln's desk. She didn't speak, but she nodded barely and dropped a sticky note on his desk. "Call building services. The AC on 30 is off again." There was no please, no thank you. But Lincoln smiled anyway. He dialed the number like it was second nature. That was the only thing today that didn't require Google. At lunch, he found Nora and brought her up to the rooftop terrace, the only place she hadn't grown overstimulated in yet. The breeze was soft. The city below hummed like a lullaby. Nora sat beside him quiet. After a while, she pulled out a tiny bottle of soap bubbles from her backpack. She uncapped it, dipped the wand, and with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, she blew a stream of bubbles into the sky. "Therapy?" he asked, smiling. She nodded. She dipped again, blew again. Lincoln leaned back on the bench. "You know, I was scared of this job." Nora didn't respond, but her hand brushed his. "Not because of the work," he added, "but because I didn't think anyone up here would see us." He looked at her. "You know what I mean?" Nora's fingers moved. "We see us. That's enough." Evelyn Rhodes stood watching them from behind the rooftop access door, hidden just out of view. He didn't know she was there. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood in silence as the bubbles floated through the air and shimmered in the afternoon sun, ephemeral, fragile, perfect. And for a moment, Evelyn's face, usually carved from steel, broke, just slightly, a crease of something old, something she hadn't felt in a long time, long enough to forget the name of it. Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat in her office staring at a crayon drawing that had appeared on her desk. No one saw who left it, but she knew. The top of the drawing had her name spelled in uneven block letters, and below it, a bubble diagram of the company's core comm systems. At the bottom corner was a stick figure with a tiny triangle for a skirt and long scribbled hair. Next to it, a stick figure with big eyes, barefoot, and between them just one line of crayon text, not broken, just different. She stared at that phrase for a long time. By 4 p.m., the office buzz had shifted again. People whispered. The guy from legal made a joke about the new janitor-turned-Jedi. Someone from marketing offered Lincoln her unused ergonomic chair. And in the break room, Lincoln found himself face-to-face with Wyatt Granger for the first time since the trial started. Wyatt didn't smile. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You enjoying your little pity parade?" Lincoln blinked. "Excuse me. This place isn't a playground. It's not a sob story incubator. You want sympathy? Go mop floors. I did mop floors. And now what? You think your kid makes you special?" Lincoln's voice was steady. I think every parent is special when they keep showing up. Wyatt laughed sharp and bitter. You're not here because you're qualified. You're here because Evelyn wants to make a headline out of a janitor. Lincoln nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm here because nobody taught me that kindness disqualifies you. Wyatt stepped closer, voice low. Watch yourself, Morrow. This place has a way of chewing up hopeful people. Lincoln didn't blink. Then it better have strong teeth. That night, as the office emptied out and the city outside lit up like a field of fallen stars, Evelyn opened her email and found a message waiting in her inbox. No subject, no signature, just a single line. What if kindness is a form of intelligence? She stared at it, then smiled, just barely, and closed her laptop. Let me give you a piece of advice, Wyatt Granger said, tossing a paper towel into the break room trash like it owed him rent. If you walk into a place like this with your heart showing you're not brave, you're bait. Lincoln turned from the coffee machine, the pot still steaming in his hand. He'd only wanted a cup of quiet. Instead, he got Wyatt. Again. Wyatt stepped in close. Too close. His breath smelled faintly of burnt espresso and unspoken grudges. You think this building runs on kindness and crayons? This place runs on results, metrics, margins, loyalty to the chain of command. You don't get to rewrite that just because you brought a cute kid to the office. Lincoln set the pot down gently. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. No, Wyatt's voice dropped low and sharp. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're halfway to becoming some kind of office folk hero. The janitor with the genius daughter, the underdog story. Great for morale. Terrible for discipline. There was a pause. Lincoln didn't flinch, just looked at him. Calm. Wyatt shook his head, his voice turning to gravel. You think I got this far by being likable? I clawed my way here, from the night shift, from the basement. I earned every damn inch. I believe you, Lincoln said. Wyatt blinked. I believe you, Lincoln repeated. And I'm not your enemy. Wyatt leaned in even closer. You're worse. You're the guy who makes people believe they can skip the climb. That afternoon, the operations meeting was held in the big, glass-walled boardroom on the 33rd floor. Sunlight poured in, catching every polished edge. Lincoln wasn't invited, but he was asked to sit in and take notes. He took that seriously. Sat in the back corner. Yellow notepad, quiet hands. Wyatt ran the meeting with military precision. No wasted breath, no detours. His PowerPoint slides were like marching orders. Midway through the session, Evelyn entered. She didn't apologize for being late. She didn't have to. The room recalibrated around her presence. She took her seat at the head of the table and nodded toward Wyatt. Continue. Wyatt clicked to the next slide charts on employee productivity. We've seen a slight dip in output since last quarter, he began, coinciding notably with the implementation of our new culture-first policies. Relaxed dress code, family-friendly Fridays, open-door hours, and, of course, new hires in non-traditional roles. The last part hung in the air like a smoke grenade. No one said Lincoln's name, but everyone felt it. Evelyn tilted her head. So, you're suggesting kindness is making us inefficient? I'm saying morale doesn't equal performance, Wyatt replied coolly. And nostalgia doesn't replace skill. She didn't flinch, noted. Then, without looking, she turned a page in her leather-bound notebook. Lincoln, she said suddenly. What do you think? Every head turned. Lincoln blinked. Wyatt's nostrils flared like a horse smelling fire. Lincoln stood slowly, cleared his throat. Well, I'm no expert, but where I come from, morale is performance. You don't mop a floor well if you hate the building. A beat of silence. And he added, if people feel seen, they tend to see problems before they happen. Evelyn nodded almost imperceptibly. Thank you. Wyatt didn't look at Lincoln. He stared at Evelyn, and for the first time in years he felt something shake loose in his grip. Later that day, Wyatt stood in the dim light of his office, staring out the window as rain hit the glass like it had something to prove. His hand tightened around an old laminated badge-faded photo, outdated logo. The one from his first week on the night shift 12 years ago. He still remembered that version of himself. Young, broke, alone, wearing steel-toed boots and hauling trash at 2 a.m., because it was the only shift that didn't require smiling. Back then, he believed the only way up was through grit and closed fists, through silence and scars. He never asked for help, never showed weakness, and never ever brought a kid to work. So when he saw Lincoln Morrow walk in with a soft voice and softer eyes when he saw the CEO lean forward instead of pushing back something in him twisted. Not out of hatred, out of fear. Because if this man, this janitor with warm eyes and a barefoot daughter could win in his world, then maybe the ladder Wyatt had bled to climb was never real. The next morning, Wyatt called a private meeting with Evelyn. "I need to file an internal complaint," he said calmly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Against Lincoln Morrow? On what grounds?" "Favoritism. Blurred boundaries. He's using his child to curry emotional favor. It's a manipulation tactic, whether intentional or not." Evelyn folded her hands. "You really believe that Wyatt didn't blink?" "Yes." There was a long pause. Finally, Evelyn sighed. "I'll take it under advisement." Wyatt stood, turned to leave, then paused. "I used to think you were the sharpest person in the room," he said over his shoulder. "Lately, I'm not so sure." Evelyn replied without looking up. "Maybe the room changed." That afternoon, Lincoln found a folded piece of paper on his desk. No signature, just one sentence handwritten in blocky ink. "This isn't a charity, Morrow, and she's not a mascot." He stared at the words for a long time, then folded the note again and tucked it into his coat pocket. Nora came to sit beside him not long after, humming softly, fingers tracing an invisible map on the desk surface. He looked at her, her curls wild, her eyes bright, her silence loud in all the right ways. He smiled. "No, baby," he whispered. "You're not a mascot. You're a compass." Back in his office, Wyatt sat alone staring at an empty mug. Somewhere in the hallway a child laughed. Not loudly, just freely. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't know whether to smile or rage. "Up here," Lincoln whispered, "we breathe different air." The rooftop was mostly unused, an old break area from a renovation past forgotten in the shadow of sleeker lounges below. But to Nora, it was a kingdom in the sky. The city stretched endlessly beyond the railings, skyscrapers glittering like a box of spilled diamonds. And, in the golden light of Friday's late lunch hour, bubbles floated lazily above the concrete, catching reflections of sun sky and one little girl's quiet joy. Nora stood barefoot, spinning slowly, cheeks puffed as she blew another string of iridescent spheres into the breeze. The bubble wand was pink, the bottle shaped like a teddy bear retrieved from the side pocket of her dad's old work bag like a magician's treasure. Lincoln sat on the edge of a bench, arms resting on his knees, watching her breathe, watching her decompress. This was her therapy. No waiting rooms, no labels, just sky and silence and soap. And for Lincoln, this was the only place he could take off the armor. Downstairs, he was the janitor who filed a resume in Times New Roman. Up here, he was just a dad. A soft click of heels on concrete. He turned. Evelyn Rhodes stood at the edge of the rooftop access door, arms crossed not in judgment but as if bracing herself against something unfamiliar. She wasn't wearing her blazer. That was the first surprise. The second, she didn't speak. She just stood there watching Nora. Then slowly, she stepped forward. She reached down and slipped off her heels, and, for the first time since Lincoln had met her, Evelyn Rhodes let her feet touch bare concrete. Nora saw her and paused mid-spin. The little girl's gaze dropped to the heels, then up again. Then gently, she held out the bubble wand. Evelyn blinked. Is this an invitation or a challenge? Nora didn't answer, but her eyes did. Evelyn took the wand. She dipped it, raised it, blew. A perfect bubble floated out and away, rising like a secret into the wind. Nora clapped one silent clap, her palms barely touching. Lincoln watched it all with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, because in that moment he realized something. Evelyn Rhodes didn't come to reprimand him. She came to understand him. Your daughter Evelyn said finally, as the bubbles danced around them, she maps things, doesn't she? Lincoln nodded. She processes the world visually, patterns, shapes, motion. It calms her. Evelyn knelt beside Nora, who was now drawing something with chalk on the rooftop tile. Wobbly squares and arrows and looping lines like a game of Candyland met a circuit board. "What's this?" Evelyn asked. Nora looked up, then reached into her little backpack and pulled out a folded paper. She handed it to Evelyn. The CEO unfolded it carefully. It was a map, crudely drawn but precise in its own way. Labeled hallways, colored rooms, symbols Evelyn recognized from the building's network diagram. And at the center, circled in red crayon, was a series of question marks near the server closets. "What's this supposed to be?" Evelyn asked Lincoln. Lincoln frowned. "She's been drawing that for days. Says it's the broken part of the building." Evelyn stared at the paper. She knew exactly what that red circle covered. The East Network node, the one that had been crashing intermittently for 3 weeks. It couldn't replicate the failure, but it was affecting data syncs across 3 departments, a multi-million-dollar efficiency drain they still hadn't diagnosed. She looked at Nora, and for the first time in her executive life, Evelyn Rhodes didn't feel in control. She felt humbled, because the barefoot girl with bubbles had seen something her engineers missed. Later that afternoon, Evelyn sat in her glass office, barefoot heels dangling beneath the desk, the paper still in her hand. She didn't call it tea. She didn't send an email. She sat. She stared. And she remembered something her mother once said when Evelyn was 8, curled up crying after being left out of a birthday party. Sometimes the quietest ones see the most. Her intercom buzzed. "Ms. Rhodes," her assistant said, "Wyatt is asking to finalize the Q3 review slides with you. Tell him I'll be ready in 20 minutes. And Mr. Morrow's contract extension, do you want me to?" She paused, then said clearly, "Put it on hold. Understood." She looked out of the window and whispered to no one, "This changes everything." That evening, as the last of the staff filtered out, Lincoln stayed behind to empty bins on the executive floor. As he passed Evelyn's office, he saw her light still on. The door was open, and on her desk, placed carefully deliberately, was the bubble wand. Next to it, a yellow sticky note in block letters, "Thank you for the blueprint." "Nora," he chuckled softly, then whispered, "She's not just mapping buildings, Evelyn. She's mapping people." Downstairs in the janitor's closet, Lincoln knelt beside his daughter. He washed her feet in the utility sink like he always did before heading home. Soft rag, warm water, tender hands. "She walked the building today," he said, and the building listened. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder. Lincoln smiled quietly. "Someday," he whispered, "they'll stop asking why you don't wear shoes, and start asking how you saw what they couldn't." "This isn't about a janitor," Wyatt Granger growled. "It's about precedent." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the executive boardroom sat in uncomfortable silence. Wyatt stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, tie loosened less like a COO, more like a man cornered by ghosts. "Because if he gets to leapfrog the system," Wyatt pointed not at anyone, but at the idea of Lincoln Morrow, "then what the hell are the rest of us doing here?" Across the table, Evelyn Rhodes didn't blink. Her fingers were steepled lips pressed into a thin line. The folded blueprint Nora had drawn, now laminated, sat beside her untouched, undeniable. "He didn't leapfrog anything," she replied calmly. "He stepped in when no one else could see the problem." Wyatt chuckled low and bitter. "A bubble-blowing barefoot girl and her dad, who can't even CC an email. That's who you're defending in front of a board that signs our paychecks." He turned to the others, legal, finance, HR, his voice rising. "This is a billion-dollar firm, not a daycare with janitorial benefits." Earlier that morning, it began with an email. Anonymous sender. No signature. Just 3 lines. "Morrow is manipulating you. He uses the kid as bait. HR should investigate immediately." Attached was a blurry photo Nora sitting in Evelyn's office, barefoot, drawing on a flip chart while Lincoln looked on. No context. just enough poison. The email landed in the inboxes of the board, legal, and HR by 6:42 a.m. By 9:15, there was an emergency ethics review. By 9:22, Wyatt was already sharpening the knives. Lincoln never got the memo. He was on sublevel B2 replacing air filters when his access badge stopped working. The elevator wouldn't take him back up to 32. He tried the service stairwell. Locked. By 10:00, he was in the lobby holding Nora's tiny lunchbox and staring at a security guard who wouldn't meet his eye. "Can you call, Ms. Rhodes?" Lincoln asked. The guard cleared his throat. "Sir, I've been instructed to ask you to wait outside." Lincoln didn't raise his voice. He just nodded and stepped back into the city's noise with a brown paper bag in his hand and a question in his chest he was too afraid to ask. Back in her office, Evelyn stood at the window, arms crossed. The board had recessed. Wyatt's words still echoed in her ears. "We don't get to play favorites," he'd said, "especially not with someone who can't even spell intranet." The words stung, not because of what they meant, but because of what they revealed. Wyatt wasn't afraid of Lincoln. He was afraid of what Lincoln represented. Proof that kindness could matter more than credentials. Proof that maybe, just maybe, the ladder wasn't the only way up. Evelyn walked to her desk. She picked up her phone. Her thumb hovered over Lincoln's contact. But before she could press it, the door knocked. It wasn't HR. It wasn't Wyatt. It was Nora, escorted by Marlene, the front desk supervisor. "I found her sitting by the fountain," Marlene said. She wouldn't speak, but she handed me this. She passed Evelyn a folded note. Inside, in purple crayon, were 6 words. He didn't mean to break anything. Evelyn knelt down. "Sweetheart, where's your daddy?" Nora just shook her head, then reached into her backpack and handed over her missing sneaker, the same one she'd lost that first day, the one Lincoln kept in his bag like a lucky charm. Evelyn swallowed hard. She stood. To hell with protocols. Outside the building, Lincoln was seated on a bench beside a landscaping crew still holding Nora's lunch. Evelyn marched through the revolving doors like a storm on purpose. He looked up as she approached, startled. "Ms. Rhodes." She didn't let him finish. "You're not suspended," she said. "You're not under investigation, and you're not a charity case." He blinked. Then, "Why the access lockout?" she exhaled. "Because some people confuse fear with policy." He looked down at the bag in his hands. "They think I'm using my daughter." "They're wrong," she said. "But I should have defended you faster." He nodded slowly. "I'm not here to be saved. I just wanted to work, to give her a world where she wasn't a problem to fix. You gave her more than that," Evelyn said. "You gave us more." She handed him the shoe. "She came looking for you. That says everything." Back in the building, Wyatt sat in his office watching the security footage loop. Lincoln at the bench, Evelyn stepping out. Nora's tiny hand clutching that sneaker like it was gold. He closed the window, opened his email, and began typing his resignation letter. But halfway through he stopped, and instead typed just 5 words. "We need to talk. W." That night, Lincoln sat in the corner of his modest apartment, Nora curled in his lap asleep. He looked at the paper bag she never opened. He thought of Evelyn barefoot on the rooftop, of Bubbles, of the look in Wyatt's eyes when he said, "This isn't a daycare," and Lincoln smiled, because maybe the world needed a few more daycares, and maybe, just maybe, kindness was qualified. The email subject line read, "Internal Network Mapping," from A. Crayon. Evelyn hadn't slept. Not really. She'd replayed the day's conversations 100 times, Wyatt's venom, the board's silence, Nora's soft, shoeless presence. But when she opened her inbox the next morning, it wasn't an executive update that caught her eye. It was an IT technician named Jill Ramirez. Jill wasn't known for embellishments. Her message, like the sender, was straightforward and precise. "Ms. Rhodes." This might sound insane, but the hand-drawn network Nora Morrow left in your office. "We just realized it matches 90% of the core mapping for the Tier 3 firewall bug we've been chasing for 3 weeks. I ran it through 3 simulations. If this were code, we'd call it genius. But it's crayon. Thought you should know. Jill Evelyn sat back, stunned. The laminated sketch had been sitting on her desk this whole time. She pulled it closer. There, next to Nora's bubble-shaped icons and curving purple lines, was a single section marked with 3 crooked question marks. That section. It was the same subnet address that had been silently failing. Within the hour, Evelyn was outside Lincoln Morrow's apartment, standing awkwardly in the dim hallway of a third-floor walk-up that smelled faintly of coffee and baby powder. She could hear the muffled sound of cartoon music behind the door. She knocked once, twice. Lincoln opened it wearing a faded sweatshirt and holding a spatula. His hair was unkempt. He smelled faintly of syrup. He froze. Ms. Rhodes. "May I come in?" she asked. He blinked. Sure, yeah. Just watch out for the Lego minefield." She stepped inside carefully. The living room was cozy, but cluttered books, crayons, 2 mugs of hot chocolate, one untouched, and a paper tent made from chairs and a bedsheet. Nora peeked out from beneath it. Evelyn smiled at her. "Hi, Nora." Nora blinked once, then held up a drawing, this one of a cat in space, and vanished again into the tent. Lincoln scratched his head. "I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting anyone." "Is this about yesterday?" Evelyn walked to the table, setting her tote down gently. She pulled out the laminated drawing. "This," she said, "is why I'm here." Lincoln looked down, his face flushed. "I told her not to leave her things on your desk." "No," Evelyn interrupted softly. "Don't apologize." She took a breath. "Our IT department has been investigating a critical vulnerability for nearly a month. Dozens of man-hours, firewall disruptions, conflicting packet loops. 3 different consultants failed to pinpoint the cause." Lincoln tilted his head. "Okay." And then Nora walked in. Evelyn said, her voice catching with a handful of crayons, and figured it out. Lincoln stared at the sketch like he was seeing it for the first time. "She doesn't even read yet. She doesn't need to," Evelyn said. "She sees what we can't, what we stopped seeing a long time ago." He sat down slowly. "She maps emotions, too," he said quietly. "That's how she makes sense of the world. Colors mean safety. Shapes mean movement. Repetition means comfort." Evelyn watched him, something shifting in her gaze. "You've taught her a new language," she said. "No," Lincoln replied, shaking his head. "She taught me. I just finally started listening." A pause. "She saved us," Evelyn said. "She saved a multi-million-dollar system by being exactly who she is, and who she is," Lincoln added, "wouldn't have fit in your HR database." They both smiled, faint but real. Later that afternoon, Evelyn walked into the IT floor, something no CEO at Ventrix had done in at least 5 years. She held up Nora's drawing like a parchment of prophecy. "Run the simulation again," she said to Jill. "This time, follow the crayon." 10 engineers gathered. No one laughed. Because by now, the legend of the Barefoot network map had already started circulating like wildfire. At 3:17 p.m., the simulation confirmed a full system fix with a 97.2% efficiency increase. Jill stood back from the console and whispered, "She really did it." Meanwhile, Lincoln was back in the lobby. His badge still didn't work, but this time the security guard came running out with a grin. "Sir," he said breathlessly, "they told me to bring you up immediately. Back to maintenance. To the boardroom." Lincoln blinked. "Boardroom?" The elevator dinged. The guard winked. "Welcome to the top floor, Mr. Morrow." Evelyn met him at the elevator herself. "You're going to explain Nora's drawing," she said, "to the board." "To the board," she confirmed. "And they're going to listen." "I don't have a degree," Lincoln warned. "You don't need one," she said. "You have proof." He hesitated, then nodded. "But I'm not using PowerPoint." Evelyn smiled. "Didn't think you would." As the board filed in, there was a hum of curiosity. Some had heard rumors. Most had written them off. Then Lincoln stepped up to the front. No suit, just a black t-shirt, clean jeans, and a pair of scuffed work boots that still smelled faintly of bleach. He set down a flip chart and a pack of markers, and said simply, "I'm here today because my daughter sees the world differently, and yesterday that saved yours." No one moved. He opened the flip chart to Nora's drawing and began. He didn't speak like an engineer. He didn't speak like a janitor either. He spoke like a father. "I used to get frustrated when Nora refused to wear shoes. It embarrassed me. I thought it meant I was failing." He pointed to the question marks. "But then I realized those bare feet were her radar, her way of reading energy, of finding the invisible static that the rest of us miss." He paused, like this system flaw, that she found without even knowing the words for it. Silence. Then a CFO in the back said softly, "My son's autistic. He draws sound. In color." Lincoln nodded. "Then you already know." When he finished, Evelyn stepped beside him. She didn't say much. Just this, "There's no degree for emotional intelligence, no certificate for kindness, but maybe we've been measuring the wrong things." She turned to the board. "I recommend we bring Lincoln on as a human operations consultant starting immediately, and with him, a new way of looking at how we listen, learn, and lead." The vote, unanimous. Even Wyatt, who stood outside the glass wall, nodded once and walked away. Not out of spite, out of understanding. That night, as the lights dimmed and the offices emptied, a cleaning crew arrived. One paused beside the whiteboard where Nora's sketch still stood. She studied it, smiled, then whispered, "Maybe we're all just missing colors," and went back to mopping the floor. "Sir, the boardroom is ready." The assistant's voice was barely above a whisper, as if she too understood that something sacred was about to unfold behind those frosted glass double doors on the 34th floor. Lincoln stood outside, holding nothing but a marker and a roll of flip chart paper. No notes, no laptop, no slides. He looked down at his shirt, clean ironed by hand this morning. His name patch was still on it. Lincoln Morrow. Facilities. "I don't belong in there," he muttered to himself. Then he felt its small fingers slipping into his calloused hand. Nora. She looked up Barefoot as always, eyes soft but steady. She made the sign for "You can." Lincoln swallowed hard. "Yeah," he whispered, "I can." He turned the handle. The boardroom was cathedral silent. 12 board members, 1 CEO, 33 floors above the street where Lincoln used to mop in the shadows. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, fingers laced, eyes unreadable, but behind them something new, faith. "Mr. Morrow," she said gently, "the floor is yours." He nodded, walked to the front, and set the flip chart down. Silence. "Then I used to think people like you," he gestured to the room, "lived on a different planet." A ripple of uneasy chuckles. He continued, "Where I come from, the only board I ever dealt with was a mop bucket on wheels. No suits, no quarterly projections, just leaks and light bulbs." He flipped the first page. Nora's drawing, now enlarged and laminated, was clipped at the top. "But 2 days ago, my daughter walked into your world. Without shoes, without fear, and somehow, without knowing it, she fixed something you couldn't." He paused. "Not because she's magic, but because she sees differently." Mr. Morrow, a board member, interrupted, clearing his throat. "While this story is touching, are we to believe this child actually understood network architecture?" Lincoln smiled. "No, sir. She didn't understand your systems. But she understood something deeper. Patterns, energy, noise where there shouldn't be noise." He pointed at the 3 question marks. "She saw this gap, felt it, and called it out before your analysts even found the entry point." Another pause. Then a quiet voice from the legal advisor at the end of the table, like a canary in a coal mine. Lincoln turned to her. "Exactly." He flipped the next page. It was blank. Then in clean strokes he began to draw not routers or firewalls, but 2 shoes. One with laces, one without. "My daughter doesn't wear shoes not because she's stubborn, but because the world is too loud." Textures, sounds, lights. Most of us learn to ignore the noise. She never could, so she built her own rules. He turned back to the room. "You called her a distraction, a mascot, but what she really was a mirror." Silence. Then Lincoln dropped his voice. You want efficiency, profit, streamlined systems. That's fine, but I'll tell you what saved your millions this week. He tapped his chest. Was heart. The room held its breath. I wasn't applying to be a hero, Lincoln said. I just wanted a chance to provide. For her, for me. He looked around. And if I'm being honest, I didn't think you'd ever let someone like me sit at this table. He chuckled softly. But maybe someone like me was always meant to be here, just not the way you expected. He stepped back. That's all I've got. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Evelyn stood. Thank you, Mr. Morrow. She turned to the board. I'm not here to pitch a vote today. I'm here to tell you what I've decided. We need more than IQ and credentials. We need EQ, emotional intelligence. We need people who see people. She looked toward Lincoln. And Lincoln Morrow sees what most of us forgot how to. An older board member leaned forward. What do you propose? Evelyn took a breath. I'm creating a new role, human operations consultant. His job, to advise us on emotional design, how to communicate across difference, how to lead with heart, how to listen, not to numbers, but to people. There was a murmur of protest. A few raised eyebrows. Then a voice cut through the noise. Wyatt Granger. He was standing just outside the glass. I vote yes. Gasps. Evelyn opened the door. Mr. Granger, you no longer have board privileges. I know, he said. I resigned. But if my voice still means anything, he stepped inside. This man reminds me of who I was before I got promoted out of my humanity. He faced Lincoln. I hated you, he said, because you reminded me of me. Before I gave up on people, he extended his hand. Lincoln took it. Back at the table, the legal advisor spoke. Fine. If he saves us one more lawsuit from HR, he'll be worth his weight in gold. Laughter. Genuine this time. Another board member chuckled. Besides, who else gets the IT floor to stand up and clap during system simulations? The vote passed, unanimous. Lincoln Morrow was now an official part of the company, no longer just a janitor, but a compass. As he walked out, Evelyn caught his arm. You know what convinced them, he raised a brow. What? She smiled. You didn't wear a suit. You wore the truth. Outside, Nora was waiting, spinning slowly on her bare feet, head tilted to the sun. Lincoln crouched down. Well, baby, looks like we're staying. She made the sign for happy, then hugged him tight and long. Upstairs, the flip chart still sat open. 2 shoes side by side, one with laces, one without. And underneath in blue crayon just 3 words. Different is beautiful. The party was already in full swing when Lincoln stepped through the elevator doors. It wasn't the kind of party he was used to, no plastic tablecloths or backyard grills. This was the quarterly celebration of Ventrix Capital Champagne Flutes, sleek lighting. Curated playlists and a rooftop view of the skyline that shimmered like a dream someone else was supposed to live. Lincoln hesitated in the doorway, feeling the tug of his worn soles against the polished floor. But then there she was, Nora. Barefoot, as always sitting cross-legged near the string quartet, blowing bubbles into the crisp evening air like she owned the sky. And Evelyn, standing by the buffet sharp in a midnight blue blazer, laughing softly with someone from finance. The moment she saw Lincoln, her face changed. Not softened, deepened. Like a page turning mid-novel into something you didn't expect, but always hoped was coming. She made her way to him. You came, she said. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. She smiled. You're not just welcome, Lincoln. You're needed. At that moment, someone else stepped forward. Wyatt Granger. He wasn't in his usual tailored armor tonight. No cufflinks, no cold glint in his eye, just a man with sleeves rolled and a plate of half-eaten bruschetta in one hand. Mind if I say something, he asked Lincoln. Lincoln raised a brow. You usually do. Wyatt huffed a laugh, then something unexpected. I hated you, he said. Eyes locked. You walked in here with nothing but a mop and a résumé in Times New Roman. and somehow you cracked something I spent 20 years trying to build." Lincoln said nothing. Wyatt looked down. "But hate. It's a cover. You reminded me of the version of me that believed people mattered more than power. I buried that version a long time ago." He looked up again. "And I think I owe you a thank you for unearthing him." Lincoln extended his hand. Wyatt took it, firmly, gratefully. Later, the room quieted as Evelyn stepped to the center. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as the music dimmed and the lights dipped into a warmer hue. She held a single sheet of paper in her hand. "I don't usually do speeches," she began, "but tonight I have an announcement." People looked up from their hors d'oeuvres. She continued, "When I took over this company, I believed in results. I believed in polished precision and performance, and I still do. But over the past few weeks, I've learned something I didn't expect, something a barefoot little girl and her janitor father taught me." She looked toward Lincoln and Nora. "We don't need more efficiency. We need more heart." A pause. "I'm officially appointing Lincoln Morrow to the position of Human Operations Consultant." A wave of murmurs swept the room. "He will advise us on communication, emotional intelligence, and design thinking, starting with how we treat the quietest voices in the room." Someone from marketing clapped, then someone else. And suddenly the whole room was on their feet, clapping, some even cheering. But Lincoln wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Nora, who stood still in the corner, eyes wide, hands slowly signing the word, "Proud." As the applause faded and music returned, Evelyn walked up to Lincoln with a glass of sparkling water. "You still nervous?" she asked. "Less than I thought," he said, "though I don't know what a human operations consultant really does." She smiled. "You'll figure it out." He looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't have to do this, Evelyn." "I know. So why did you—" She looked toward the skyline, eyes reflecting the light of a dozen dreams. "Because I've spent most of my life being the smartest person in the room, but lately, I've started craving something else, which is wisdom." Lincoln chuckled. "You might have picked the wrong janitor for that." She turned to him, soft but steady. "No, I think I picked exactly right." Later that night, as the party thinned and city lights began to blink like stars caught in a whisper, Lincoln found himself at the edge of the rooftop with Wyatt beside him. No speeches now, no tension. Just two men, both broken in different ways, breathing the same night air. "You staying long?" Granger Lincoln asked. Wyatt took a long sip of his drink. "Maybe, maybe not. Evelyn gave me a choice: step down or step in. And I'm not ready to quit, but I'm finally willing to listen." Lincoln nodded. "That's a good place to start." Meanwhile, Nora wandered toward the fountain bubbles trailing behind her like silent fireworks. She stood still, looked up, and whispered something only the wind heard. Evelyn knelt beside her. "You okay, little one?" Nora made the sign for safe. Evelyn touched her hand gently. "You make this place better." You know that Nora didn't smile, but she didn't have to. She just pointed first to herself, then to Lincoln, then to Evelyn, and finally she drew a heart in the air with her finger. The rooftop lights glowed soft and amber as the night settled over them. No headlines, no spotlights, just people, choosing people. And in the quiet between songs, someone swore they heard it, the faint sound of bubbles rising, and the world, for just a moment, felt healed. The chairs were already filling up in the sunlit atrium. It was Employee Appreciation Day at Ventrix Capital, a new tradition. Evelyn had said one rooted not in metrics or margins, but in meaning. A stage had been set up in front of the tall glass windows with a backdrop of flowering plants and soft lights. Above it, a banner read, "People First Always." Lincoln stood backstage adjusting the tiny microphone on the collar of Nora's yellow dress. She tugged at it, annoyed, but he gently steadied her hands. "Remember," he whispered, "you don't have to say anything you don't want to. Just stand there if that's all you feel like doing. That's enough." Nora didn't sign anything back at first. She looked out at the crowd, gathering rows and rows of grown-ups in shiny shoes, expensive watches, and the kind of eyes that often looked past her. But then she reached up. Slowly, deliberately, she touched her dad's face with both hands, one on each cheek. Then she signed, "You fixed me." Lincoln froze. The words hit harder than any speech he could have written himself. "I just showed up, kiddo," he murmured. "You did the fixing." A few moments later, Evelyn walked up to the podium, smiling warmly at the audience. "Thank you all for being here," she said. "Today isn't about profit margins or productivity graphs. It's about the people who make this place more than a workplace, people who bring their whole selves to what they do and change us all in the process." She glanced toward the side of the stage. "And one of those people is here with us now." There was a soft rustle of curiosity as she gestured. "Please welcome our youngest consultant, Nora Morrow." The crowd went still, and then a tiny barefoot girl walked to the center of the stage, her curls bouncing, her dress fluttering like a sunflower catching wind. She stood without flinching. Her eyes scanned the room. So many strangers. But she wasn't afraid. Because this time she had something to say. She looked over to Evelyn, who stood ready beside her. Evelyn nodded gently, then knelt down to Nora's level and whispered, "Whenever you're ready." Nora raised her hands and began signing. A few seconds later, Evelyn translated aloud, word for word. "My name is Nora. I don't like shoes. I don't like loud lights or being touched too much, but I like computers and patterns and bubbles. When I came here, some people laughed at my dad. Some people didn't understand me. But my dad didn't try to change me. He listened. He sat with me when I didn't talk. He stayed when I screamed. He waited when I hid under desks. My dad didn't fix the building. He fixed me, and that's harder." The atrium fell into a silence so full you could hear someone put down their coffee cup on the far end. Nora stood still, not smiling, just being, and that was enough. Then, as if cued by something no one else could hear, she raised one hand into the air and blew, a single bubble. It drifted out into the room, slowly, lazily, reflecting the faces of every executive intern and accountant who watched it rise. And when it popped gentle as a heartbeat, people applauded. Not politely, not out of obligation, but thunderously, emotionally, truthfully. Lincoln stepped forward, lifting Nora gently into his arms. He whispered something only she heard, and she rested her head on his shoulder. Wyatt Granger, standing near the back of the room, wiped his face with his sleeve. Someone from accounting sobbed openly. Even security guards applauded, and Evelyn. She walked back to the mic with eyes that shimmered but voice steady as stone. "I used to think leadership was about being the smartest one in the room," she said. "But Nora reminded me sometimes the most important person in the room is the one you almost didn't see." She looked at Lincoln, and the one who refused to stop seeing her. After the ceremony, people lined up not for free donuts or coffee, but just to say thank you to Nora. One by one, they knelt down to her level. Some spoke, some signed a simple hi, some just smiled and touched their hearts. Nora didn't respond to every one of them, but she didn't retreat either. She stood her ground, and for the first time in her life, the world didn't feel too loud. Later that afternoon, Evelyn found Lincoln leaning on the balcony overlooking the garden courtyard. "Was that too much?" he asked. "Too much," she echoed. "That was everything." He chuckled. "You sure you want us sticking around?" Evelyn leaned her elbows on the railing. "I don't want you sticking around, Lincoln. I want you standing beside me. There's a difference." He looked at her. This woman who once laughed at his resume, who now stood beside his daughter like family. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Please. I used to think being a good father meant shielding Nora from the world. But maybe being a good father means showing her that the world can be changed." She smiled softly. "You already did." And down below on the grass still damp from the morning dew, Nora ran barefoot again, this time not to escape, but to belong. Sunday mornings in the city were rarely quiet, but today somehow they were. The usual blur of traffic was softened by birdsong. Even the breeze seemed to hush itself as it rustled through the trees in the Central Park. It was a good day to be barefoot. Nora was already ahead of them, running through the grass, her ribbon loose in her curls, her yellow dress swaying like sunlight in motion. Her giggles floated in the air like tiny songs the wind couldn't quite catch. Lincoln stood beside Evelyn on a blanket beneath an old oak tree. A basket lay half open beside them, half-eaten grapes, a closed book of poetry, and one of Nora's sketch pads, edges fraying pages curled from love and use. "She's not afraid anymore," Evelyn said quietly, watching the little girl twirl with arms stretched wide. "She never was," Lincoln replied. The world just didn't know how to look at her. Evelyn turned to him, studying the way the light touched his face. "And you always did." Lincoln shrugged. "She made me better just by needing me. She made me stay when I wanted to run, learn when I didn't know how, try again when I wanted to give up." He paused. "She made me become someone worthy of her." Evelyn smiled softly. "You already were." Nora came bounding back toward them, breathless, barefoot, and blooming with joy. She held something out in her hands, a single soap bubble wand and a tiny bottle of solution. "Want to try?" she signed. Lincoln laughed. "You know I'm terrible at this." Nora nodded seriously, then signed, "Try anyway." So he dipped the wand and gave it a careful blow. One large bubble emerged, trembling in the air before floating up, catching a glint of the sun. Then another, and another. Nora clapped in delight. Evelyn reached out and gently placed her hand on Nora's small foot, brushing off a blade of grass stuck to her heel. Her touch lingered for a moment, warm and protective. "You've walked us all home," she whispered. "Haven't you?" Nora tilted her head. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the warmth. And she smiled. They lay back together on the blanket, Nora curled between them, tracing patterns into the clouds with her fingers. Evelyn rested her head on Lincoln's shoulder, and for a long time no one spoke. Because some moments don't need words, they just need to be. From across the field, a man with a camera watched from a respectful distance one of the company's new marketing hires. He had been sent to capture candid moments for the next internal campaign. But as he looked through the lens at the barefoot child, the janitor turned consultant, and the CEO who'd once called his resume a prank, he lowered the camera. Some stories, he realized, were better left untold in slideshows. Some stories were meant to live, not to be sold. Back under the tree, Lincoln turned to Evelyn. "Do you ever wonder how we got here all the time?" she said. "I mean, really. One resume, one laugh, one barefoot interruption, and 1,000 quiet miracles after that." He chuckled. "If someone had told me last year that I'd be sitting under a tree with you being out-bubbled by a 6-year-old prodigy, you would have walked away. I would have run." They both laughed. Then Evelyn grew still, her voice softer. "Lincoln." She said, "Thank you for not giving up." He looked at her. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing her, and for letting her change you." She nodded. "And thank you," she added, touching his hand, "for letting her change me too." As the sun dipped lower, the golden light turned the park into something almost unreal, like a watercolor painting too beautiful to exist in real life. One final bubble floated upward, higher than the rest. This one caught perfectly in the light. It reflected 3 faces. A man who had nothing but gave everything. A woman who had everything but learned what really mattered. And a little girl who didn't speak with words but spoke louder than anyone else ever could. The bubble shimmered, paused, then burst. And somehow nothing felt lost. Everything felt found. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this needed to hear that today. That no resume defines your worth. That quiet love can speak louder than titles. That sometimes the smallest feet leave the deepest footprints in our lives. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories that heal, uplift, and remind us what really matters, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring more light into this world, one story at a time, from our little storytelling family to yours. Thank you for spending time with us today. We'll see you in the next story.